Today, I'm going to fully restore and upgrade this DualSense controller. It has clearly seen a lot of use. The rubber coating on both thumbsticks is completely worn away, the shell shows visible signs of wear, and quite a bit of dirt has accumulated between its parts. I'll completely disassemble and clean the controller, replace the original analog modules with TMR sticks, install Clicky mods for the L1, L2, R1, and R2 buttons, replace the worn thumb grips, and add Lizard Skin's anti-slip grips. Before disassembling the controller, I'll check its current condition. As the test results show, both sticks are significantly worn, and the left stick already has noticeable drift. The circularity test shows an error of around 15.5%. That's a serious level of degradation, so I'll replace both analog modules. It's also important to check the board revision, which in this case is BDM-010. Each DualSense board revision requires a specific version of the Clicky mod. Since this controller uses the first revision BDM-010 board, I'll be installing a compatible kit. I'll start by removing the decorative trim and the top buttons. Then unscrew the 4 screws holding the shell together. Next, I'll release the clips underneath the trim and carefully separate the back panel. I'll disconnect the battery, remove its bracket, disconnect the ribbon cables, and release the internal frame. After that, I can completely remove the main board. Next, I'll remove the 2 screws securing the internal frame or mid-frame to the front shell. After that, I can carefully separate the mid-frame from the controller's shell. The inside of the controller also needs a thorough cleaning. Inside the controller, both on the board and the mid-frame, there is a lot of accumulated dust, dirt, and even some hair, possibly from pets. This is quite common. With regular use and without routine cleaning, controllers can collect a surprising amount of debris inside. In this case, the dirt hasn't affected the condition of the board itself. It simply needs a thorough cleaning. I'll remove all the dust and debris, and the board will be in excellent condition again. Next, I need to remove the old analog modules. I don't use a hot air station or special nozzles that heat all the pins simultaneously, as I prefer to avoid unnecessarily overheating the board. My method takes a little longer, but I believe it is gentler on the board. First, I unclip the potentiometer housings from both sides of each module and remove the internal components. Then, using fine cutters, I divide the metal housing into several pieces. This allows me to desolder and remove each remaining part individually, applying the soldering iron to the board for only a few seconds at a time. This is the method I'm going to demonstrate now. Next, I secure the board in a specialized holder to keep it stable while I work. Before soldering, I remove the rubber seals from the board so they don't get in the way or become damaged during the process. Once the soldering iron is heated, I apply a small amount of fresh solder to each pin of the analog modules. It mixes with the factory lead-free solder and makes it easier to melt, allowing the components to be desoldered more easily. Then I heat each pin one at a time and carefully remove the remaining parts of the modules individually, gradually freeing the board from the old analog modules. After removing the old sticks, I need to clear the remaining solder from the mounting holes and contact pads. There are several ways to do this, including a solder sucker, specialized vacuum desoldering tools, and other methods. However, I find copper desoldering braid to be the most convenient and practical option. It absorbs molten solder very effectively and allows the board to be cleaned carefully. First, I apply a sufficient amount of flux. Then, I place the copper braid over the contacts and heat it with the soldering iron. The braid absorbs the old solder, clearing the contact pads and mounting holes. After that, I remove any remaining flux residue, and the board is fully prepared for the installation of the new analog modules. After removing the old modules and thoroughly cleaning the board of any remaining solder and flux residue, I can begin installing the new TMR sticks. I'll be using Ginfull modules. I've installed these sticks many times before, and they have proven to be reliable, with no issues so far. First, I insert both modules into the mounting holes, press them firmly against the board, and temporarily secure them with a few solder joints. Once I've confirmed that the sticks are positioned correctly and sit flush against the board, I solder all the remaining pins to secure the modules permanently. Now that the new sticks are installed, I need to test them and make sure everything is working correctly without any errors. To do this, I connect the battery to the board, plug it into the computer, and open the testing and calibration software. The test results show that both sticks are installed correctly and working without any issues. The calibration is completed successfully, and the results are saved to the controller's memory. This means the TMR module installation is complete, and I can move on to the next stage, installing the Clicky mod for the L1, L2, R1, and R2 buttons. Now I'll move on to the next stage, installing the Clicky mod. First, I need to remove the original flex circuit from the mid-frame. As you can see, quite a lot of dust has accumulated on both the flex circuit and the frame, so I'll lightly clean the surfaces with a brush. The flex circuit is secured by several retaining points. I carefully release it from the fasteners and remove it without bending or damaging it. Then I brush the mid-frame once more to remove any remaining dust before moving on to disassembling the trigger mechanisms. Now I'll detach the trigger mechanisms from the mid-frame. On controllers with a BDM-010 board, each trigger is a separate removable module. To remove it, I need to unscrew the two screws at the top of the mid-frame. Next, I'll disassemble the trigger mechanism itself. First, I carefully disconnect the ribbon cable from the trigger board. Underneath it, there is another screw that also needs to be removed. After that, I can remove the housing cover and pull out the metal pin that holds the trigger button in place. Once the pin is removed, the button can be taken off. giving me access to the contact membrane and the original flex circuit responsible for registering button presses. In the next step, I'll replace these parts with the new components from the Clicky mod kit. First, I need to remove the original trigger flex circuit and contact membrane. They are fairly easy to remove. I simply lift them carefully and pull them out using tweezers. For this installation, I'll be using a Clicky mod kit from eXtremeRate, one of the best-known manufacturers of this type of modification. Before installing it, I'll do a quick unboxing and take a look at what's included. This kit is compatible with BDM-010 and BDM-020 controller revisions, so it can be installed on either board version. Inside the box, we have the tools, L2 and R2 button extenders, and the modules themselves, packed in an anti-static bag. The extenders are necessary because the trigger travel becomes much shorter after the modification. The anti-static packaging shows that the manufacturer has taken proper care to protect the electronic components. This is the kit I'll be installing in this controller. The Clicky mod flex circuit is almost identical in size and shape to the original one. The main difference is that it has micro switches installed on it, which provide a shorter travel distance and a distinctive click. The new flex circuit fits into the original position inside the trigger mechanism and connects to the trigger board. After that, I can begin reassembling the mechanism. First, I attach the included extender to the L2 or R2 button. Then I reinstall the button and secure it with the metal pin. Once the button is in place, I reassemble the trigger housing. Tighten all the screws and reinstall the completed module onto the midframe. Then I repeat the same process for the second trigger. Next, I need to disconnect the red motor power wire from the trigger board. After installing the Clicky mod, the trigger mechanism works differently. The button travel becomes much shorter, so the original adaptive resistance system no longer operates as intended by the controller manufacturer. For this reason, the adaptive trigger motor needs to be disabled. It is still difficult to say with certainty whether disconnecting the motor is necessary in every case. However, the Clicky mod manufacturer recommends doing so I'll follow its instructions for this installation. In the future, I plan to conduct a separate test by measuring the electrical parameters and checking how the mechanism behaves with the motor connected and disconnected. This should provide a more informed answer as to whether disabling it is truly necessary. For now, I'll disconnect the red motor power wire. I'll leave the disconnected wire inside the controller after insulating it properly. To do this, I'll cover the contact with heat shrink tubing and carefully shrink it using a heat gun. Then I'll secure the wire to the motor housing with adhesive tape so it doesn't move around or interfere with any other components. This approach keeps the modification reversible. If the owner ever decides to remove the Clicky mod and return the controller to its original configuration, the wire can easily be released and reconnected. This means that all the modifications I'm making are fully reversible. Now that all the internal modifications are complete, I can begin reassembling the controller. First, I reinstall the trigger mechanisms onto the midframe, secure them in place, and reinstall the flex circuit. After that, I move on to the third stage, thoroughly cleaning the shell and the remaining plastic components. I wash all the removed shell components under warm running water with soap, using a brush to remove dust, dirt, signs of use, and any unwanted odors. It's important not to use excessively hot water, as overheating can damage the plastic. In my experience, the shell of a black controller developed whitish marks and became slightly deformed after being exposed to high temperatures. For this reason, the water should only be slightly warm. After washing, all components must be dried thoroughly. If you use a hairdryer to speed up the process, select a low heat setting and keep it at a safe distance to avoid overheating or deforming the plastic. Now that all the components have been cleaned and fully dried, I can continue reassembling the controller. I attach the mid-frame to the front shell, reinstall all the smaller components, then I continue assembling the remaining parts of the controller. Once the mid-frame is attached to the front shell, I can install the main board. Before doing that, however, I need to fit the thumbstick caps onto the analog modules. As we saw earlier, the original thumbstick caps were severely worn, with their rubber coating almost completely destroyed. I'll replace them with brand new ones, install them onto the TMR modules, and then return the main board to its position. Next, I'll reinstall the rubber seals that I removed earlier to prevent them from being damaged during soldering. Then, I'll place the main board back into its original position and resolder the motor wires that were previously disconnected, making sure to preserve their original placement and polarity. Next, I'll reconnect all the ribbon cables that were disconnected earlier, including those for the trigger modules, microphone, and touchpad. Before continuing with the reassembly, I'll make sure that each ribbon cable is fully inserted into the correct connector and securely seated. After that, the plastic battery holder needs to be installed and secured with a screw. At this stage, the internal assembly of the controller is nearly complete. At this stage, I can connect the battery and test the controller once again before completing the final assembly. This intermediate test allows me to detect any potential issues before closing the shell, so I won't have to disassemble the controller again later. For the test, I connect the controller to my computer, open the testing software, and perform a quick check of all the buttons and triggers. I also test the microphone, vibration, and the controller's other functions. The adaptive trigger resistance is now disabled because I previously disconnected the power supply to the trigger motors, as recommended by the Clicky mod manufacturer. The test results show that all the buttons and triggers are working correctly. Every press registers clearly, with no errors, accidental inputs, or sticking. All the other tested functions are also working properly. The controller is now ready for final assembly. Now that the testing is complete and all functions are working properly, the only thing left to do is finish reassembling the controller. I'll reinstall the back panel, tighten the 4 screws, return the L1 and R1 buttons to their positions, and reinstall the black decorative trim. The controller is now fully assembled and ready to use. The only remaining step is to perform the final calibration of the new TMR sticks. For the calibration, I reconnect the controller to the computer and open the software. First, I calibrate the center position of the sticks. In this calibration tool, the process starts automatically after clicking Calibrate Stick Center. Next, I perform the initial calibration of the stick range. To do this, I click Calibrate Stick Range and rotate each stick several times clockwise and counterclockwise. Once the process is complete, I check the results. At this stage, the sticks are already calibrated, and a circularity error of approximately 3% to 4.5% is perfectly acceptable for normal controller operation. However, to achieve the most precise result possible, I also use the fine-tune stick calibration option. I won't go into the details of this process in this video. I'll simply show it at an increased speed. If you have any questions about fine-tuning the sticks, leave them in the comments, and I can explain the process in more detail. Now the controller has been fully cleaned and reassembled. The new TMR sticks and thumbstick caps have been installed, the Clicky trigger modification is complete, and all functions have been tested and calibrated. The only remaining step is to install the Lizard Skin's anti-slip grips. These grips are especially useful during long gaming sessions. When your hands begin to sweat, the controller can become slippery, while Lizard Skins provide a more secure grip and comfortable tactile feel. I'll be installing a Lizard Skins grip kit designed specifically for PlayStation 5 controllers. First, I'll do a quick unboxing and take a look at what's included. Inside the package, there are instructions, the grip panels, and a wipe soaked in an alcohol-based solution. Before installation, I need to open the wipe and thoroughly clean the controller handles with it. This degreases the surface and prepares it for the grip panels, ensuring proper adhesion to the shell. After that, I can carefully apply the grips, gradually smoothing them along the shape of the controller. In the end, I didn't just restore a worn-out controller, I transformed it into a fully customized DualSense. The new TMR sticks should significantly reduce the risk of stick drift and provide a much longer service life. The Clicky mod shortens the travel of the L1, L2, R1, and R2 buttons, making each press faster and more precise, which is especially useful in shooters and other fast-paced games. The Lizard Skin's grips also provide a more secure hold and make the controller feel better in the hands. I hope this video was helpful and gave you a better understanding of the restoration process and the technical aspects of these modifications. Let me know in the comments what you think about this upgrade and which modifications you would like to see in future videos. Thank you for watching. If you found this video useful, I'd really appreciate your like, comment, and share. I have plenty of new content planned for this channel, including controller and console repairs, upgrades and modifications, Nintendo Switch projects, custom retro console builds, retro game library exploration, and much more. If these topics interest you, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned. Your support will help motivate me to create more videos and continue developing the channel. See you in the next one!